The hallway smelled like bleach and cold takeout when I opened my front door. I still had my hospital bracelet on. The nurse had told me to rest another 2 days, but something about my husband's voice on the phone that morning felt wrong. Too cheerful. Too rushed. So I came home early. I heard laughing before I reached the bedroom. A woman's laugh. Then my husband said something low enough that I couldn't make out the words, followed by the sound of our bed creaking against the wall. I stopped walking. For a second I honestly thought I was still drugged from the pain medication. But then I saw the red heels near the bedroom door. Not mine. I didn't scream. Didn't cry either. I just stood there quietly, one hand still gripping my overnight bag while my chest tightened in a way that hurt worse than the surgery. That's when I realized something else. My husband hadn't noticed I was home. I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound. Then I walked out of the house, got into my car, and sat there staring at the steering wheel for almost 20 minutes. My name is Grant Holloway. And that was the moment my marriage ended without a single word being spoken. But what happened the next morning was worse. I spent that night in a small hotel 10 miles from the house. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those red heels sitting beside my bedroom door like they belonged there. Around 3 in the morning, I logged into our joint accounts from my phone. That's when things started feeling even stranger. Large withdrawals. Restaurant charges downtown. Hotel bookings from weeks earlier. Some of them happened while I was still in the hospital recovering. I shouldn't have noticed one charge in particular, but I did. A furniture delivery company. Almost $6,000. Our house already had furniture. I kept staring at it anyway. At sunrise, I called the bank, froze every joint credit card, and moved my personal savings into a separate account my husband couldn't access. Then I contacted a locksmith. I still remember the pause on the phone when the guy asked why I needed emergency lock changes. I simply said, "My spouse moved out." By noon, every lock in the house had been replaced. I still hadn't spoken to my husband once. No calls. No texts. Nothing. Part of me expected panic from him eventually. Instead, around 4 that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Just one sentence. "You should have stayed in the hospital 2 more days." I read the message 3 times before deleting it. No name. No explanation. Just that sentence sitting in my chest like a warning. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not even my younger brother, Dean, who kept calling to check on me after the surgery. Something told me to stay quiet and watch. That evening I finally drove back home. The new locks were installed. The house was silent. Too silent. I walked room to room noticing small things I had ignored for months. My husband's closet was half empty. A framed wedding photo from the hallway was missing. And the guest bedroom door was locked from the inside. That stopped me cold. I knew I had left it open before going to the hospital. For a second I thought maybe my husband was still inside the house. I grabbed the fireplace poker and unlocked the door carefully. The room was empty. But it didn't look like a guest room anymore. There were unopened moving boxes stacked against the walls. Women's clothes folded neatly on the bed. Makeup on the dresser. And sitting beside the window was a printed lease agreement. My address. Both their names. Starting date, 2 weeks from now. That's when everything inside me went completely still. They hadn't been having an affair. They had been preparing to replace me inside my own home. I sat on the edge of that bed for almost an hour holding the lease agreement. My husband's signature was at the bottom. So was hers. Lena Mercer. I recognized the name immediately. She worked in the billing department at the private clinic where my husband managed operations. I had met her twice at company dinners. Quiet. Polite. Forgettable. At least that's what I thought. I kept digging through the boxes. New dishes. Bathroom supplies. Photo frames still wrapped in plastic. This wasn't some reckless affair anymore. They had planned a future inside my house while I was recovering in a hospital bed. Then I found something worse. A yellow folder hidden under folded blankets. Inside were printed emails between them. Most were ordinary at first. Complaints about me working too much. Jokes about my surgery recovery. Then one line made my stomach drop. If the second procedure fails, everything transfers to him automatically anyway. I reread it slowly. Second procedure. I wasn't supposed to have a second surgery. That's when I remembered something strange from 2 weeks earlier. A nurse had entered my room late at night asking about medication I was supposedly allergic to. At the time, I assumed it was a paperwork mistake. Now I wasn't so sure. And suddenly that anonymous text felt a lot more serious. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I knew how crazy the story sounded without proof. An affair was believable. Murder suspicion was something else entirely. so I stayed calm. The next morning, I drove back to the hospital and requested copies of every medical document connected to my surgery. The receptionist hesitated at first until I mentioned legal review. That changed her tone immediately. While waiting, I sat in the cafeteria replaying every strange moment from the past few months. My husband insisting on handling my medications himself. Him pushing me to sign updated insurance paperwork while I was heavily medicated. The way he kept asking doctors how long recovery complications could last. I shouldn't have ignored those things. But when you trust someone for 11 years, your brain explains away what your instincts try to warn you about. By noon I had the records. I took them straight to Dean. My brother used to work hospital compliance before opening his own consulting firm. If something was wrong, he'd spot it faster than I could. He spent nearly 40 minutes reading in silence. Then he leaned back slowly and looked at me differently. Not emotional. Careful. "Grant," he said quietly, "why does this chart show medication you were never supposed to receive?" Dean made copies of everything before saying another word. Then he locked his office door. That alone told me how serious this was becoming. He pointed to 2 entries buried deep in the medication chart. Both showed doses administered during the second night after my surgery. One problem. I was allergic to that medication. Severely allergic. My records had documented it for years. "Could it kill you?" I asked. Dean looked down at the paperwork before answering. "If your reaction had been strong enough, yes." The room went quiet after that. I kept thinking about my husband bringing me soup in the hospital that same night. Sitting beside my bed. Smiling like nothing was wrong. Dean contacted someone he trusted in hospital administration while I stayed completely off the radar. By evening we had something worse than suspicion. Security footage. A nurse had accessed my medication cabinet using her ID badge. But she wasn't alone. My husband was standing beside her. The timestamp matched the exact hour of the unauthorized medication entry. That nurse was Lena's cousin. Everything connected too perfectly. Still, Dean told me not to move yet. "People make mistakes when they panic," he said. So we waited. And right on schedule, my husband finally showed up at the house around 9 that night. He was banging on the front door before I even turned off the living room lights. Then he shouted something that changed the entire situation. "Grant, where's the folder?" I didn't answer the door. I just stood inside the dark living room listening to him panic outside. That folder mattered more than the affair. More than the house. Which told me everything. My husband kept knocking for almost 10 minutes before his voice changed completely. Less angry. More desperate. "Grant, listen to me," he yelled. "You're misunderstanding this." That was the first time he sounded afraid. I finally opened the door halfway. He looked terrible. Sweating. Eyes red. Like he hadn't slept. But I noticed something else immediately. Lena wasn't with him anymore. He tried stepping inside. I blocked him quietly. Then I held up the yellow folder. His face drained of color so fast it honestly shocked me. I asked one question. Why was I given medication I'm allergic to? He froze. Not confused. Frozen. That silence lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it was enough. Because behind him, 2 detectives walked up the driveway alongside hospital investigators and a state fraud officer Dean had contacted earlier that evening. My husband turned around slowly. One detective introduced himself and asked about insurance policy changes made 3 weeks before my surgery. That's when my husband finally realized the real problem. The hospital had already pulled the security footage. And Lena had apparently started talking first. Lena confessed within 12 hours. Not because she felt guilty. Because my husband tried blaming everything on her the second investigators separated them. According to the detectives, they had increased my life insurance coverage 6 months earlier without ever mentioning it to me directly. My husband handled most of the paperwork while I was busy running my contracting business. If my reaction to the medication had gone badly during recovery, it would have looked like a tragic medical complication. Clean, quiet, profitable. The nurse lost her license immediately and was later charged alongside them. My husband took a plea deal before the case reached trial. I never attended the hearings. I didn't need closure from a courtroom. Honestly, the hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing how calmly someone can smile at you while planning your funeral behind your back. About 8 months later, Dean helped me sell the house. I bought a smaller place near the lake 2 hours north and started over quietly. No joint accounts. No rushed trust. No pretending instincts or paranoia. Sometimes people ask why I never remarried. I usually just shrug and change the subject. But every now and then I still think about those red heels outside my bedroom door. That was the first warning. And the only one I almost ignored.